Beautiful and strong people, welcome back to lesson 3, the hinge of the deadlift mastery. The deadlift is not a squat. Surprise, surprise, it's a hinge. So, why so many people are squatting to get into position? Now, for some people that are just very well leveraged and they just have, for example, really long arms, short femurs, they just get into that position very easily. Squatting isn't going to be much of a problem. But for most of us, we kind of have to treat the deadlift as a hinge movement because it is a hinge movement. And I want to refer back to the moment in which I've been talking about anthropometrics on the squat, and you've seen the moment arm comparisons. Okay, so the moment arm of a low bar position and the moment arm of a high bar position, and how within the moment arm of the high bar position, you're having more equally distributed, let's say, moment arm for the knee and moment arm for the hips. While when you're actually doing the low bar, you're having a longer moment arm of the hips in comparison to the knees. Okay. Now, in this particular situation with the deadlift, you're having all the moment arm around the hips. Most of it is around the hips. So that's why we want to make sure that we want to use the best possible leverage that we actually have, the best possible, let's say, musculature with the joints that have the most leverage to actually generate force, in which our case is pretty much our hips. Okay, so we want to think about pushing the hips back and really loading the tension around our hamstrings and glutes. And you're going to notice on both of these videos how I'm thinking about really pushing the hips back to get into position. So I'm creating a really big space between the hips and the bar. And that's exactly what I want to do because this is my leverage point. Okay. While doing so, I want to make sure that my ribs and hips are actually stacked. I want to keep my shins relatively vertical. So again, I don't want to squat down. Okay. I want to push the hips back. And if you're a long femur individual, just push the hips back to the point in which you can't push them anymore, and after that you can start squatting down a little bit. That's going to open up a little bit of mobility to push the hips even further back so you can actually lean even more forward. Now the torso angles are going to depend based on build. We're going to get into this on the individual differences, but in principle, the longer the femur and the longer the torso, the more you're going to kind of turn that deadlift. You're going to have to lean a lot forward in comparison to someone that has a short femur, short, let's say, torso and just freaking long arms. You can almost stay upright. So that's when you're kind of turning the deadlift into a squat because the mechanics of it just turn into a squat. But not everyone is built like that. So most of us just fall around this kind of category. The outliers are just outliers. So the way we want to think about the hinge is thinking about loading the posterior chain. Okay, we want the hamstrings stretched, we want the glutes primed, we want to keep the lats engaged so the bar is actually staying close to us. Okay, we want to think about the hip hinge like a slingshot. Okay? We have the slingshot. We grab the rubbery material or the sling itself. We're pulling it, and we're trying to create as much tension with it as possible while keeping the handle as fixed as possible, because if that's not fixed, you're not going to be able to actually do the pull. Okay, so you want to pull it as much as possible, and after that you release. So the more you're actually pulling onto it, the more tension you're actually building, and the farther away the object that you're trying to launch with a slingshot is going to go. So that's the kind of mindset you want to think about it when trying to load the posterior chain. Now, the space that we're actually creating between the hips and the bar is actually our leverage point. Okay? So the hinge is actually creating room between the hips and the bar, so we can actually generate force through it by bringing the hips to the bar, standing tall, and breaking the floor with the barbell. Okay, so we want to allow the hips to actually wedge under the shoulders, and this works for both conventional and sumo. It's not only for sumo because you have me in a sumo stance right now, but it works for both of them. Okay, so it's pretty much the same principle. The mechanics might actually differ, but the principle is the same. Because with the conventional, you're going to be able to get into a deeper hinge and more forward torso, while with sumo, you're going to have a shorter hinge and just more upright torso. But both of them, hips back, not down. That's the general rule of thumb. And of course, the common mistakes, what common mistake can you actually think about? Squatting to the bar instead of actually, hinging to the bar. Knees being too far forward, the bar is actually going to be pushed away. Losing brace while hinging. To when you're doing the wedge, the hips are going to roll forward, so you're going to get into a little bit of a butt wing, and all the tension is going to be built within your lumbar spine, because that's the pretty much the region which is going to take the hit. Or overreaching arms instead of hinging. So, being in position up tall and you're just, overreaching to grab the bar, you're not creating any kind of leverage in there. So you're just grabbing the bar and after that trying to lift it up. You're going to be in a very bad position to actually pull. So in summary, the deadlift is not a squat. It's a hinge. So we need to respect it. Stop squatting to the deadlift. Unless you're an outlier. Hips back, shins vertical, brace intact. We want to really think about loading the hamstrings and glutes like springs. We want to treat it like a slingshot. Hinge. The hinge creates space for the wedge, which we're going to talk about. Conventional and sumo may differ a little bit, but in principle, they're the same. So, treat the conventional like a sumo when you're setting up and treat the sumo like a conventional when you're setting up, and you're going to have success. Just like Thomas is actually doing. So I'll catch you on the next one. See you.